Success of an entrepreneur.
We've raised the bar.
Learn firsthand from successful business owners and create your own path to success.
I'm going to show you how great I am.
It's time to hit the road to growth with team lead of the Enriquez Group, Realtor Vinny.
Hi, Road to Growth listeners. Today I have Jeff and Patty. You know what? When I saw this come across, we're talking about horses, racing horses, and I was like, you know what? It's just knowing the horse, how fast they're going to go. You know what? I was schooled so far, and I know you're going to be schooled listening to this episode, just talking to Jeff of how much science goes into all this fun stuff. Thank you, Jeff and Patty, for being here today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, like we were talking about before, I mean, I'm really into baseball, and I know how they used to be very big into the scouting, and then they started doing kind of more number-based, kind of knowing, all right, well, this pitcher does this and this. And it sounds like, I mean, you were kind of the leading the charge in the horse racing business in that kind of sense.
Yeah, we were. We started almost 40 years ago. And when there were Apple IIcs and, you know, the calculator was a new thing. And, yeah, we were using real film. There was no video. The videos were like $200,000 for the kind of video. We had high-speed film cameras with real film. And we had to send the film. We would be at an auction. And they would show the horses and sell them the next day. We have to send the films down to NFL labs overnight and then with couriers and bring them back and then project them onto a wall with a graph on the wall and take measurements. Now it's all, you know, digital.
What was it? I mean, because you were an adrenaline junkie from what you were telling me, riding motorcycles, riding horses. I mean, where did the idea of I'm going to raise horses into the racing business come about?
Well, I had law and business degrees from Harvard. I did them both at the same time, and it was on the beginning of the joint program. Those guys like me who were crazy. And then I went for a blind date one day in May, and we went riding at a rental stable. And instead of falling in love with the girl, I fell in love with the horse. and then I started riding and I learned how to do it, and I competed, and I jumped big walls and shit. I got really deep into it. And then I said, you know what? I want to do this. I want to work with animals. I want to be outside. And I had Archibald Cox was my thesis advisor for Harvard Law and Business. Archibald Cox, the guy from the Midnight Massacre with Nixon and the whole thing. That he was the lawyer and that resigned and the whole thing. I had to do a thesis on combining law and business. And so I went in there, and it was like March, and I hadn't done shit, anything. And he says, well, how's it going? I looked out the floor, and I mean, that's something. He says, well, what are you interested in? And I looked at, I said horses, and I thought he'd throw me out. And he turned around, and he took out this big book, and he plops it down. His office was in the stacks at Harvard in the library. It was just way down in the middle of nowhere. And the dust goes up, and he says, this is the statute that governs horse racing in Massachusetts. No one's ever looked at it at this school. Why don't you do that? So I went crazy with it. I did really well. I found out all kinds of great stuff. I found out all kinds of corruption at the Suffolk Downs when they're funny business with their books and subsidiaries and all this other junk. And I decided that I was too big to be a jockey and I was too poor to own the horses. But I could they were doing it the way they've been doing it for 300 years. I could bring something other than eyeball and intuition. I could bring management and science. And then I got hooked up with on the part-time with the U.S. Olympic Sports Medicine Committee. And I saw what they were doing. It was reaction to the East Germans coming on the scene and winning everything. And with their science. And I decided I could do this for horses. Anyway, I was working at Citicorp in Manhattan. And I was on my way to be in investment banking, international stuff. And they had the atrium of their brand new building at 55th and Lex. And it was this huge, tall, like 4 stories high atrium. In the bottom was the cafeteria. And all around the walls was a huge mural of Pennsylvania farmland. And I was looking at it one day and I said, what am I looking at it for? I could be living it. And within a week, I quit and I rented a farm in Pennsylvania where I grew up. And I began, and I had this one horse and a baby, and I needed to break it. So somebody told me about this jockey that would do that, help me with that. And I called her up, and she said she'd come. And then I was late coming there from my job. And so she wasn't there anymore. And I said, well, I'll pay you for your time. Please come back. And she said, but she gave me such hell. Well, you can't do that to me. Anyway, that was Patty. And here she is. I don't know why she came back, but she didn't, thank God.
So Patty's been with you since the beginning, sounds like.
She's been with me since the beginning. She suffered. And the first 20 years, it was miserable. It was awful. You know, we were building science and data and equipment and everything. In the beginning, everything failed and the horses would be awful. And it was even worse before she got there. But she kind of helped me because she brought the traditional, as we went along, the traditional expertise. She'd been a jockey and she was a successful trainer. She had, she knew this stuff. Like I told you, I would look at the altimeter, but she looked out the window to see if we were off the ground. And that combination proved to be powerful. And by the time we finally got a break, we were, doing small time stuff. We finally got this new guy. He was from Egypt. He'd sold his company, his brewing company, and he had $400 million. And he wanted to be in horse racing. He liked horses, and he wanted an edge. And he was one of the smartest people I've ever met, and a really good businessman. He had other problems, but he was something else. And so he hired us to do it for him. And so that was our big chance. And actually, I should say before that, we hadn't exactly not had anything. We had a neighbor, George Strawbridge from Augustin Stable, and he got curious. So he let us buy him a couple of horses. In the first 2 years, we had back-to-back world champions for him. And then we worked with Ken Ramsey, who's won the leading owner and leading breeder in the United States several times. He's a legend. And he asked me, he said, well, I pitched him, and he said, come to my farm and look it over and give me a recommendation. So I went there. This is a good story. I went there, and and when I came back, I analyzed it all, and I told him he had a new sire. He was trying to make this sire successful, and it was from his own line. It was unknown. It was unlikely to do squat. So he needed it to sire a good horse. So I said, take this horse. It's by your sire as a young horse, and enter it in the Belmont Stakes, which is the third leg of the Big Triple Crown, the classic race, world renowned. And he burst out laughing. He says, this is amazing. It hasn't won a race yet. And I said, yeah. He said, it's not fast. I said, yes, but it never slows down. I said, by the end of a mile, and in the United States, they almost never run a mile and a half. Everything's much shorter. So I knew when it went a mile and a half in the Belmont, it would be right there. So he did it, and the trainer was pissed. It was a big name, famous trainer. And we went there that morning, and we were there for the race. And the trainer said, it's a command performance. And he was really pissed off, this, that, and the other. And then the racing form the night before was talking about who might win and who was good in this. And then they said, and then there's the jokers and the idiots, and that was us. So they left the gate, and of course we're trailing the field, and I'm ready to hide under the table, right? And then it gets about halfway through, and the horse starts to pick up, starts to catch up. And at the head of the stretch, he's really rolling. And in almost all races, when it looks like a horse is passing everybody at the end, he's the one slowing down the least. They're all slowing down. So he didn't slow down at all. So he's flying by him. He caught up. He might have won, but he didn't have enough space. It should have been 1 3/4 miles. Anyway, I think he was second or third. So now instead of a maiden, he had a horse that was stakes placed in one of the biggest races in the world for his sire, his young sire.
For a grade one.
A grade one stakes. I think he was second. Anyway, just to prove it wasn't a fluke, he went to the Louisiana Derby, and he did it again. So that's it. He hired me. So now I had those two under my belt. And then the Egyptian came along, and he invested $40 million. And by the time we were through, we turned it into $64 million. And that was before he got American Pharaoh, who was worth at least $50 million and was the first Triple Crown winner in 37 years. And we had organized the sire. We had bought the dam of the horse. We had participated in it coming along. And so that was kind of like a high point. And then he had won everything. He had made several sires, and he had the Triple Crown winner. And then he had other business problems and personal stuff going on, and he just disappeared. So he's gone now, but that was a ride. That was our chance, and that's why we really proved it. So now we don't have to tell people it's a theory. We say we've already done it. We've already had 3 or 4 world champions. And we don't buy that many. And the average price we spent throughout the whole thing was the average at auctions. Most new players come in and they buy $1 million horses, and they buy all the most expensive horses, 700,000, 800, and we didn't do any of that. None of it. Our average price was $155,000, not what everybody else was doing that was trying to come in and buy the game. And we bought a lot fewer horses than a lot of these stables did. But it doesn't matter. So everybody thinks
what's the pricing of it all? Like, so how does it work for like the proceeds of a win? Is it you have the owner, you have
the purse is divided up about depending 10 to 15% to the owner, 10 to 15% to the jockey, depending on how famous and how good and how wonderful they are.
It's not 10%, 15% to the trainer and the jockey.
Okay, 15 and 15 sometimes less, and the rest goes to the owner.
Gotcha.
But the main thing there is if you want horse racing and not have to spend a lot, or if you actually want to make it into a business, you have to have a stable. Because one or two horses is like a lottery ticket. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. So it's fun, and you can lose less money and do better if you're really good at it. But if it's a business, it has to be the size of a stable. And to do that, it's like most professional teams. It's not cheap, but that doesn't mean you can't participate and for a lot less than other people. I mean, some people are paying through the nose, and other people are almost paying nothing and playing the game.
Well, when you're starting it out, I know you talked about like the U.S. I think Olympics like that, trying to bring you on to kind of dissect everything. So, and you had to have a second job. So, was the job, was that helping pay for this opportunity, or were you getting paid by the U.S. government and then kind of like?
No, my other job paid for all the research.
Okay, it did.
I did. I had degrees in law and business, and I actually did a leverage buyout, among other things. I earned a lot of money in my day jobs, and I spent every penny of it, or most of it, on the research on the farm, the horses.
So was there a time, I mean, was it American Pharoah? Was it before then? Or when was that time where you're like, I don't need the other job to actually support all these horses, bring everyone on, and not have to, it was actually supporting itself.
Yeah, during Zayat, I really didn't need to have a job by then. Of course, now I don't have Zayat anymore, so maybe I should have another job. But I also started and ran a charity for inner city teens in Philadelphia. I was talking about ADD, and I built that up into something special. I spent a lot of my money and time on that. I got professional film people from Hollywood to work with teenagers and delinquent in jail and homeless shelters and this and that, to master and apprentice to make films about stories of their lives, kind of stealth psychodrama. And it made a huge difference to those kids, where the population, 70% would get pregnant or in jail or on welfare. 70% of our kids went on to college or jobs or arts programs. We won national film awards with screwed up kids that never passed anything. We're high school against university film schools with crappy equipment, because our stories were about their lives. They were real. They weren't car chases and shoot 'em ups and special effects.
Could I interject something back about the company, though, about EQB?
Sure.
So one of the things I think that's important to realize is from the very beginning, essentially, what we tried to do was we tried to not throw the baby out with the bath. And essentially, we pick out a great athlete. And then we ultrasound his heart, and we decide he has a elite heart. And then we go forward on, if they're at 2-year-old in training sales, we can do high-speed film of their gait. But those extra tools really put traditional horsemanship at a real disadvantage.
If you find, like, if we had guys who we really respect who are great horsemen, and they pick 5 horses, we can usually eliminate 3 completely, reliably, at least. Sometimes 4.
And you said these processes or this equipment is basically patented under your own brand, or is it?
Well, we have some patents, but they're violated all over the place because we published a lot of stuff on what it is, and it's impossible. It's really hard to enforce against what somebody does in the privacy of their own computer. So, but yeah, mainly the edge is the database and the experience. I tell people we can give people the instruction manual and the violin, but they're not going to play a symphony for a while, and that's it. Plus, for the heart rates, the elite horses' hearts are bigger and stronger and different, even when they're babies, than the average racehorse. But you need a database. Why? Because an 1,100 pound, 10-month-old filly and a 1,300 pound, 12-month colt, you can't compare.
Those are big yearlings, Jeff.
Well, whatever, whatever. You can't compare. They have to be the same weight, the same height, and the same age in days within 30 days. Or you can't compare the heart data. You just get the wrong thing. You have to do that and then know, are they within that group? Are they elite or not? And that means if you do the math and the permutations, that means you need many thousands of horses, so that when you see one, you're going to have several hundred that are at least the same age and days, height, and weight. And so, that we have. And also, when you're looking at the films, I mean, I've been doing it for 40 years. I see things that I've been trained to see that are awful, that are really important, but you can't see them unless you're looking with 500 pictures a second. I know you can't, because I see the horses with terrible things sell for enormous amounts of money at every auction. I know if they saw what I saw, they wouldn't be doing that, because that horse is going to get hurt. He's not going to make it. Or if he makes it, it's going to be a short career.
The other common sense part of that is an owner and a trainer or a jockey, it's how much money they make and how successful they can be is directly related to how many times they can take the horse to the paddock to race. And so by looking at the high-speed film, he comes up with a clean moving horse, and they tend to stay sounder. In fact, much sounder.
And they last much longer, so they earn a whole lot more money. So a horse that may not be winning great races can earn $700,000, whereas the average one's going to earn maybe $30,000 because he's going to go 3 or 4 races and then goodbye, or he's going to go 7 races and goodbye. It's not enough. I think I tell people that, when I first started, if you're going into a new field like we were, everybody, you go to all the experts, and most of what they tell you is wrong. So you just have to do the work.
It has gotten a lot better, though. There are much better veterinarians, and
yes, partly because we published all that stuff. I told you this stuff, like the heart rate meter. The experts told us the horses' heart rates were, because their hearts were so big, they would be going 120 beats a minute or something, and it turns out that their hearts, at rest of the big athletes, are down in the 20s, and they can go up to 250. And that heart can change from 28 to 120 without looking like anything happened, like just on a snap of your fingers. Their hearts are faster, more, and change faster, and they're different. And when we first got our equipment to measure their heart and everything else, we were getting these wild results they told us, but they're not. They're true. When we were measuring the lungs, the Olympic Committee would put a mask on a guy and put him on a treadmill, and they would measure, try to find his VO2 max and the gases of CO2 and oxygen use and all that stuff. And so we tried that with the horses to see if we could do interval training and could we this and that with the horses. And when we tried, we put them in a pool and we put a mask on them, and so we could exercise them. And we tried to collect the gases the way they did. And they used what they called a spirometer, which looks like a great big water heater. But there was too much gas, so we had to chain it to another spirometer, and there's still too much. Chain it to a third one, still too much, in a few seconds. So finally, we used a weather balloon, so it was big enough to hold all the gases. And then we looked at each other and said, what the hell's wrong with this picture? How are they moving that much air? Why are they moving that much air? And it turned out it's because they cool themselves by panting like a dog. So their lung capacity is enough to cool this giant animal's core, and they're moving a weather balloon full of air through their lung. Their oxygen capacity, the interval training was a complete waste of time. They didn't need it. Evolution gave it to them, and they were spleen dumping themselves. They have a huge spleen, and they could blood dope themselves like the Russians were doing in the early Olympics with red blood cells. They can put 70% more red blood cells, bang, right when they come out of the gate when they get excited by wrenching their spleen. And they got all this oxygen, and interval training was a disaster because they would go lame. They can't take that amount of work, so they were sore, they were muscle bound when we tried interval training on groups of horses. So it was really very different than humans, but mainly it was very different from everything they told us. So we had to just be really careful to say, how do you know whenever they told us anything? And if they didn't have the data from elite athletes, they didn't know, because it's different than the average. That's one thing I learned from the Olympics too. The elite athletes are different than normal, as normal is different than sick or injured.
When you look at kind of where you've come from, was it harder to build your community or build like the processes and the systems?
Well, because of my expertise and my personality, I think it was easier to build the systems, even though it cost a fortune and took forever. But I did it. It was a predictable process. Do the work. What was harder was to convince people in a very tightly knit, clicked industry, when you're an outsider, to do stuff differently or to trust you. Horse racing is, notorious for rascals. Nobody trusts anybody. And it's really hard to get any traction. And still is. I mean, even after everything I've done, I think there's an awful lot of people who would not use us because they're afraid. They don't know us.
What did you?
Somebody they don't know.
What did you do? Were you reducing your percentage of winnings if you won, or what were you doing to actually convince them to actually try you, give you a chance?
I tried initially. First, I tried by publishing and showing that we had enormous databases and FDA clinical quality studies that prove stuff, and I published it, and that didn't do much. Then I focused on a couple of big clients to get world champions. And then we had 2 world champions year back to back, and then but none of that did it. I should have moved to Kentucky and gone to all the cocktail parties. That's what I should have done. And then they would have known me, and then and they would have found out what kind of guy I went. So I was in a Peace Corps. I was, I'm a straight shooter.
The thing now is the industry has changed a bit because of the price of horses and things. I think that, and so what they do is they put together syndicates, and some of the entry level syndicates, they sell a share or a half a share for like $1,000, so someone can get involved in horses, and they'll have 200 of them. And I've just thinking, I've obviously been bouncing this off Jeff, that it puts us in a very good position, because at least they have a reason for why they are purchasing a horse and what's special about it. And usually they have enough money to buy 2 or 3 or possibly 4. And then we're in the catbird seat, because we can reliably 1 and 4.5 come up with a horse that wins a lot of money, and we can do it again and again. And so it's just, that's where I think our future lies, at least at this point.
Even the big player, the biggest stables this past 2 years have been combining. You'll see the name on some of these champions, that when they're winning, there'll be 5 big name stables as the owner.
Oh, wow.
I don't. So they
is
figure
that what's going, you think?
That way they can
I'm
push.
sorry? What did you
Is
say?
that where it's going? Where you're going to
Yeah,
have?
it seems to be. It's pushed up. It's almost doubled the prices of a lot of the horses. All that money. They don't seem to care. They just want to make sure they get the good horse.
But it's actually where it has changed for us, which would be good, is that they don't even look at a middle market horse. And believe it or not, most of the really good horses come out of the middle market. It's a huge, but you have to have people who are, you can't, like I say, you have to be able to do the traditional stuff and then add on the technology, and then it becomes, then it's a very powerful tool. I always say, because I have a fairly good eye, and what I do is I line up 5 horses I love, and the gait analysis comes along and throws out 2, the cardio comes along, throws out 1, and then the vet comes out and throws out another one, and maybe both.
Find a chip. That scares people too, because they say, well, why didn't somebody else want them? One of the best horses I ever had. No, I didn't have a client to sell for it, so I just bought it. It was $37,000. His name was Great Attack. He was buying a new sire, and nobody gave a damn about it. He would end up twice in the world championships, and the second time he might have won, but the jockey came off him in the starting gate in the sprint and spotted the field 20 lengths. In the world championship sprint, started 20 lengths behind, caught up, almost won anyway. It was like 3rd or something. So, but nobody. He was $37,000. He earned $700,000 twice in the World Championships. I couldn't sell him because he was $37,000. I paid for him. I just nobody believed it.
Dude, what? I mean, it sounds like it's quite the grind.
Because I was competing with him.
It sounds like it's quite the grind. So what keeps you guys going and keep doing this? Because I would think with all you've accomplished, I mean, there's a time that maybe don't take as many horses or just relax or.
Yeah, probably what I should do is just buy my own horses and hell with it. But I haven't. You know, once you do that, then you're competing with your clients. Then nobody will use you. So.
Do you think there's a time that you'll either of you will ever retire?
I don't think I'll drop dead and I'll get buried in my dog cemetery. But I will publish everything before I go.
There's an old saying: "Do something you love and never work a day in your life."
Makes sense. Well, if we were talking in 5 years from now, where do you see the company going? Where do you see you guys going?
I see us finding some, a couple people who are serious about syndicating to the middle market. I think the next market that is available to horses and sports in general are the people who have kind of been worked out of it because of costs and things, but it's a way for them to get back in. And I think the guy who's, or the family or the woman who's got up, they have good earnings, but they don't want to, spend $100,000 on a horse. They can get in, and the upkeep is expensive too, and they can share the upkeep. And so these partnerships, go, like I say, they go anywhere from 5, big names to 100, and in between. And I just think it's it's the way the market has to go, and the industry has to realize. And I'm hoping we're we're in front of that curve, because that puts us in a very good situation. But it's a matter of, just understanding that the business is changing. And I'm sure you see that in other businesses. They start out doing one widget and have to switch into another widget. And that's that's what we're, really trying to organize and think about.
Also in racing, there's a crisis right now because too many horses get hurt. But our horses, too many horses die from injuries. Yeah. That doesn't happen with us.
Not as often.
It never happened because we don't pick horses. We screen them out. We screen out the ones that aren't appropriate.
Well, they can have. Yeah.
We've had some injuries, but nothing like what's going on out there. Our horses race longer. They're safer. So that's another contribution we can make. Maybe somebody will figure that out. We're trying to invent some technology to actually predict when the the bone breakdowns. A non-invasive bone scanner, and that's another long story. Maybe that'll be where our company goes, that technology. We actually developed that and sold it to Johnson & Johnson as a non-invasive bone scanner like 30 years ago for osteoporosis stuff. And we want to adapt that technology now to horses.
If someone's looking to get into the game, looking to purchase a horse, is it best then to reach out to you guys directly and then get your guidance on finding a horse, or is them finding a horse and then kind of reaching out to you, or what's that process look like?
Well, I think first of all, it's just as important once you have the horse to have some advisors. We do it for free after we buy the horse on where it goes and when the training and managing the horse. So you can, a lot of trainers with secretariat wouldn't win a major race. So that's really important. I think it's important they just come to us and let us advise them. And we can put them in partnerships. We can put them individually. We can help them find the right trainer for that horse and help them manage it to the right races. And, and they still be in charge and have the fun of being the owner and the runner of the thing. That's what I recommend. They come directly to us. Yes.
And the best way to get that would be going to the website, I'm guessing? Or
the website just changed from .com to .fyi. Yeah, or give us a call. Yeah.
Okay. And yeah, the website's in the show notes right there. So if you're thinking about getting that, because what's the biggest rush, right, that you guys get? Is it at the championship? Is it basically just seeing the horse race for the first time? Do you still get that thrill?
I don't think there's any bigger thrill than watching your horse win. I trained for 11 years. I rode races, and I don't care what kind of race it is. winning is everything. So
Yeah, he's gonna do it. He's gonna do it.
yeah, so it is. It's really, and you can have a lot of fun at both ends. And sometimes, I mean, I had one trainer. We had one horse that he was good on everything, but he really wanted to try out for the chess team. And then
Not the track team.
not the track team. Anyhow, he had run, and we had found this race for him. And the trainer calls me up and he says, "Patty, are you sitting down?" I said, "Oh, no, don't tell me that guy got hurt." "Oh, no." And he goes, "Nope." And I said, well, do I have to sit down? He says, "I think you better have." And I'm thinking, "Oh, you sold him." "Nope." I said, "Well, what happened?" "He won."
Yeah, he'd been such a disaster.
He got out of the gate first and got scared. Everybody was behind him.
Everybody was chasing him, we think. But it was a thrill. Watching him get almost, he's not going to do it. Yes, he is. No, he is. It was fun. It was fun. Also, it's a vindication.
Yeah.
Every time that happens, I love it when we win the race and our horse costs, $50,000, and the horse that was second was $700,000. The horse that was third was $1.2 million, and the horse that was fourth was $350,000. And they're all owned by the elite of horse racing. And we were 20-1, and I knew we were going to win.
Well,
I love that,
yeah,
but it's still a thrill when it actually happens.
You don't always know either.
Well, rarely you actually know, but I knew we had a shot, a real good shot. Nobody else seemed to think so, because it didn't fit the traditional thing. It didn't have the right daddy or something. So
Thank you so much, Jeff and Patty, for being here. I mean, I can definitely see you two have been working together for a long period of time. That dynamic is a strong one right there. You have Jeff's positivity, and you have Patty kind of pulling the reins back, like she might have pulled back the reins with some of the horses back in the day. But it's a great dynamic, and I mean, it seems like you're giving opportunity for people that don't have a background in it, but are looking to get into the racing game. And
We'd love
I appreciate it so much. Yeah. I mean, if anyone's listening and thinking about it, please go and thank you guys for being here today.
And the website's changed to .fyi, not .com. That's just remember that.
Perfect. All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much for
Yes,
this
thank you.
opportunity.